The police showed up because I launched a houseboat. On the lake I legally own. Two cruisers roared down the 3-mile dirt road, kicking up a cloud of red dust like they were chasing an armed fugitive. I stood on the freshly built dock, coffee still hot in my hand, watching the scene unfold like a surreal dream. A white Bentley glided in behind them, polished like vengeance. The door flung open before the wheels even stopped spinning. Out stepped Victoria Harlow, 32, crisp white suit, oversized sunglasses. She ran the HOA like it was the White House. She pointed straight at my handcrafted houseboat, the one I spent 2 years building by hand. Arrest him. That thing is an act of aesthetic terrorism. And right then, with 2 officers looking unsure and 1 woman frothing with power, I realized this wasn't going to end with a warning. This was war. 24 hours before the cops showed up, I thought I'd finally made it. After nearly a decade designing luxury furniture for Silicon Valley's elite think CEOs who couldn't tell maple from mahogany, I sold the company and disappeared. Not to Bali, not to a yacht, but here, my grandfather's old 50-acre ranch tucked in the Redwood Hills of Northern California, the crown jewel. A 5-acre lake so clear it looked like melted sapphire at sunrise. This was more than property. This was inheritance, patience, and peace all in one. And floating at its center, swaying like a dream, was my houseboat. Not a glorified shack on pontoons, but a sculpted sanctuary. Hand-laid teak panels, hurricane glass, and a reclaimed redwood deck that shimmered with age and soul. My own private creation 2 years in the making. I didn't just build that boat, I built the life I'd been working toward for 30 years, and I thought, finally, I was untouchable. But peace, as I'd learned, has a time limit. This wasn't some Craigslist pontoon with a beer cooler and a plastic roof. My houseboat was art. 35 feet of handcrafted devotion. Teak wood panels that gleamed like honey under the sun. Tempered hurricane-grade glass, custom-cut offering a 360-degree view of the pines and the water. Curved metalwork on the railings forged in my own shop, each piece a signature. The deck, a mosaic of reclaimed redwood that whispered stories with every knot, every groove. Below deck, I'd built a small workshop because real craftsmen never retire. They just finally build for themselves. When the crane operator, an old-timer who treated his rig like a violin, lowered it into the lake, it was like baptizing a cathedral. And as the hull kissed the water for the first time, something inside me clicked. Not pride, not relief, just stillness, alignment. That was the moment I knew this isn't just where I live. This is where I belong. Too bad it only lasted 37 minutes. For 37 minutes, everything was perfect. I stood on the redwood dock, coffee in hand, watching the morning mist drift like silk across the lake. The only sounds were the soft ripple of water against the hull and 2 blue jays bickering somewhere in the pines. My houseboat rocked gently, catching golden flecks of sunlight on its glass like a living lantern. The air smelled of pine resin and lake water clean still earned. Then I saw the dust. It started as a smudge on the horizon far down my private road. Within seconds, it thickened into a billowing trail, fast and mean. I lowered my mug, confused. No one should be out here not without calling. Then came the sound's engines, sirens, gravel skidding under heavy tires, 2 black and white cruisers kicking up enough dirt to choke a field, and behind them something white, low, and sleek. My stomach dropped. Not 1 car, 3, and none of them invited. The first cruiser screeched to a stop 20 feet from the dock. 2 officers stepped out. One older, eyes tired. The other younger, stiff hand nowhere near his holster. Not aggressive, just awkward. Before I could speak, the third vehicle slid in behind them, snow-white, low-slung, unmistakable, a Bentley Continental. It didn't park. It arrived. The driver's door flew open before the tires even stopped turning. Out stepped Victoria Harlow, 32, dressed in a blinding white pantsuit tailored like armor. Her heels stabbed into the gravel with purpose. She didn't look at me. She looked through me. Then her eyes locked on my houseboat, my sanctuary floating peacefully in the middle of the lake. Her lips curled. "Arrest him," she snapped. "That monstrosity is a direct assault on community standards." The younger officer blinked. The older one sighed. I hadn't said a single word yet, and somehow I was already the criminal. "Ma'am," the older officer began, his voice flat with fatigue. "We received a noise complaint and reports of unauthorized construction authorized." I cut in calmly. "On my own lake." Before he could answer, Victoria marched up heels, grinding into the dock like she wanted to leave scars. "That floating eyesore is visible from Sterling Point Marina. My members pay for serenity, not to stare at a lumberyard on water." She gestured with such force I thought her shoulder might snap. Her voice had that weaponized pitch that could rattle glass and patience. "I'm Ethan Reed," I said, handing over a folder. "Property deed updated survey building permits. Not in the HOA. This lake fully private. And that eyesore. 2 years of legal code-compliant craftsmanship." The younger officer coughed, might have been a laugh. Victoria didn't flinch. She just stared at the houseboat, eyes wide. "It looks like," she whispered, then stopped, frozen, pale, and suddenly afraid. For a moment, all the venom drained from her face. Victoria Harlow, Ice Queen of the HOA. Woman who weaponized bylaws like bullets just stood there staring at my houseboat like it had spoken her name. "It looks like," she whispered again, but didn't finish. Her fingers trembled slightly. Fists clenched so tight her manicured nails dug into her palm. The older cop handed my papers back with a shrug. "Everything checks out, Mr. Reed. No violations here." They turned to leave engines still humming dust waiting to rise again. But Victoria didn't move. Her voice, tight, forced, finally snapped. "This isn't over. The HOA has rules about visual nuisances visible from common areas. I'll make sure you follow every single one." She spun toward her Bentley, but not before glancing back one last time at the houseboat. And this time, her look wasn't anger, it was fear. Real, deep, personal. Something buried just surfaced. The next morning, I found an envelope tucked under my door. No stamp, no knock. Just placed there, deliberate, quiet. Inside, a printed letter on HOA letterhead. Fine, $500 per day for emotional distress caused by an unsanctioned floating structure visible from common-use property. Signed with an aggressive flourish, Victoria Harlow, President. Lakeshore Estates, HOA. I laughed out loud. I didn't even belong to her HOA. The lake sat entirely within my deeded land. No shared waterways, no easements, no jurisdiction. Then I noticed the second note. Paper-clipped, hand-written. "This is your final warning. I will not let history repeat itself. Remove it or face the consequences. You have no idea what you're playing with, Mr. Reed. No signature. Just the faint scent of expensive perfume and something else fear may be mixed with obsession." She wasn't just angry. She was unraveling. And whatever history she meant, it was coming for both of us. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been punished just for living your life? For building something that mattered to you on land that was yours only to have someone come after it? Just because they could. That's what this is. This isn't about a houseboat, and this is about power, control, fear dressed as policy. Victoria Harlow isn't just enforcing rules. She's rewriting them, inventing them, and now she's turning my home into a battlefield. But I've seen this kind of bully before in boardrooms, contracts, and meetings with 7-figure egos. They don't attack what's wrong. They attack what they can't control. Comment, "I've been there," if you've ever felt like someone tried to shrink your life down to fit their comfort zone. Because something tells me Victoria's just getting started, and she has no idea what I'm about to do next. I poured a second cup of coffee, stronger this time, and sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open, her warning note beside it like a dare. Search Sterling Point. Marina plus Victoria Harlow. At first, nothing. No articles, no incident. Odd for someone who acts like a public figure. Then I found it buried in a local finance blog. Sterling Marina faces foreclosure. $2 million in debt. Multiple offers refused. Another article 2 weeks old. HOA president. Rejects $3 cash buyout for struggling Marina. That wasn't pride. That was desperation. She was hemorrhaging money and clinging to control like a drowning woman grips the last rung of a ladder. Every thread I pulled revealed the same thing. Victoria's not protecting a community. She's protecting her last piece of leverage. And the more I read, the more one thought echoed in my head. She didn't pick me randomly. She needed a target. I started digging into public HOA records. Most people don't know this, but with the right filters you can trace where every dollar goes, especially when they try to hide it. And Victoria. She wasn't even subtle. Over the past 5 years, I found dozens of maintenance expenditures, $12 for $400. Lake preservation, $8,750. Marina safety improvements, $14 to $200. Waterway enhancement program. All of it funneled straight into Sterling Point Marina. Different labels, same destination. She'd been bleeding HOA funds to prop up her sinking business, disguising personal losses as public investments. That's not mismanagement. That's fraud. It wasn't just me she was targeting. It was anyone who got too close to her collapse. I wasn't dealing with a bureaucrat. I was dealing with a queen whose castle was on fire, and she was trying to burn everything around her, to distract from the smoke. But I wasn't just watching. I was planning. At exactly 7:02 a.m., someone pounded on my front door like the house was on fire. Not knocking, pounding. I opened it to find a man in his 70s holding an iPad like it was classified intel. He glanced over his shoulder, then whispered, "Close the curtains. She's got binoculars, high-powered ones." His name was Harold Bell. Lived 3 houses down from the marina. Nervous energy poured off him like sweat. I handed him coffee. He didn't sit, he paced. "I've been documenting everything. My grandson set up a cloud account. You need to see this." He turned the iPad toward me and hit play. Grainy footage 5 years old. A funeral procession on the lake. Dozens of boats, black ribbons. At the center, Victoria dressed in all black standing on a yacht like a grieving empress. Her voice shaky but clear over the water. "There will never be another houseboat on this lake. Ever." Then she screamed. "They took him from me." Harold paused the video. His hand shook slightly as he set the iPad down. Robert Harlow, her husband, drowned right off that yacht, middle of the night, calm waters. Official story. He was drinking, fell overboard. Tragic accident. He leaned in. But Robert was a college swimmer. 30 years on this lake. Sober, stable. And that night he'd told neighbors he planned to sell the marina, said he was done bleeding money, wanted out. Victoria flipped. Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. She screamed at him. Whole marina heard it. Called him a traitor, said he was abandoning her. Then silence. An hour later, she was on the dock calling 911. No witnesses, no houseboat inspection. 2 days after the funeral, the yacht vanished, too painful to keep, she claimed. But Harold had doubts. And now, so did I. If Robert didn't fall, was he pushed? And why did my houseboat bring all of it crashing back? Harold pulled up another file, this one a map. Red X's dotted the shoreline like silent graves. 12 families in 5 years, he said grimly. All pushed out. The Johnsons had a pontoon boat, used it for family BBQs. Victoria fined them $800 a day for excessive noise, though no one ever heard music. The Hendersons had a small sailboat, never even left the dock. She claimed it was a navigation hazard. $1,000 per day until they sold. Another family forced to repaint their kayak 3 times. Wrong shade of blue. She used HOA bylaws like weapons, twisted them until they became tools of exile. Anyone who reminded her of Robert's death was eliminated. "You're not the first," Harold said. "You're just the first to fight back." And now it made sense why she came after me so hard so fast. Because unlike the others, my houseboat didn't just threaten her rules, it threatened her truth. By noon, I'd made my decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to flip the board. While Victoria was busy weaponizing fines, I was opening my old contacts people from my Silicon Valley days. And one name stood out: Tom Bradley, the lawyer who negotiated the sale of my company. He picked up on the second ring. "Ethan, haven't heard from you since you walked away from 8 figures and bought a forest. What's up?" "Quick question," I said. "You still have connections at Riverside Bank?" There was a pause, the sound of pages flipping. "Why do I feel like you're about to make my week very complicated?" I looked out at the lake. My houseboat glowed like a promise in the sun. Because I want to buy Sterling Point Marina. And I want to do it fast. No more playing defense. Now it was my move. By 3 p.m., Tom had confirmed everything. Sterling Point Marina was on the brink, 14 days past due, on a $2 million loan. The bank owned it now technically, one move left foreclosure. Unless someone came in with cash. "You bring proof of funds and a cashier's check for the deposit," Tom said. "We might get a pre-auction deal, but you'll need to move fast." I didn't hesitate. I wired liquidity from 3 accounts, prepped paperwork, printed ownership maps, highlighted easements, every detail sharp and legal. Then I built a sign. Not just any sign. A wide slab of reclaimed redwood carved by hand, private property. Yes, including the houseboat. Below it, in smaller letters, "Have a peaceful day." I mounted it at the edge of my dock, angled perfectly toward Sterling Marina's entry road. Then I added 2 solar-powered spotlights. Not out of spite, out of principle. She wanted a war over aesthetics. I'd give her something unforgettable. The stars aligned faster than I expected. Tom called back just after sunset. Meeting set. Tomorrow night, 8:00 p.m. at Riverside Bank. Bring proof of funds, your ID, and the deposit check. There's one other interested party, but they're still trying to finance. If you show up with cash, it's yours. 8:00 p.m. The exact same time Victoria had scheduled an emergency HOA session to introduce new boat regulations. 2 battles, 1 time slot, and only one of us knew both were happening. I smiled. This wasn't coincidence. This was timing, the kind that turns legal paperwork into power. While she stands at a podium trying to outlaw my houseboat, I'll be across town buying the very place she rules from, and when she returns, her kingdom will belong to the man she tried to erase. 5 minutes of paperwork, years of vengeance. This wasn't revenge, it was realignment. The next morning I woke early, grabbed my toolkit, and walked down to the edge of my dock. Time to put up the sign. I mounted it into solid ground with stainless steel bolts, leveled it precisely, then stepped back to admire the work. Private property, yes, including the houseboat. Have a peaceful day. Then I added the lights. Solar-powered, motion-activated. At night, the sign would glow like a monument and face directly toward the one road Victoria took to her beloved marina. I snapped a photo and posted it on the community message board with a short caption. Just a friendly reminder about property lines. Open for tours if anyone's curious about craftsmanship. Harold texted 5 minutes later. She's going to explode. That was the point. Let her rage. Let her gather her forces. Because while she plotted at the HOA, I was already laying claim to her throne. 7:45 p.m. The Lakeshore Estates clubhouse buzzed with quiet dread. 50 folding chairs, burnt coffee, and residents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I sat in the back corner, laptop, open transfer page, ready. On screen, $2.1 million, 1 click from firing. Harold settled beside me, peppermint on his breath, eyes gleaming with mischief. She doesn't know. I checked the bank's visitor logs. Your lawyer's the only one who showed. At exactly 7:50, Victoria swept in. Tonight's power suit, deep purple. Hair pulled so tight it looked painful. Under eye circles masked with foundation, but the tension couldn't hide. She launched into her speech like a general before war. Due to escalating threats to our community's aesthetic integrity, I propose we increase the fine to $1,000 per day and ban all visible watercraft effective immediately. Slides clicked. My houseboat appeared on screen, lit by my own spotlights. Sunset bouncing off teak. A masterpiece. And in her eyes pure hatred, mixed with fear. Victoria clicked to the next slide. My hand-carved sign lit like a monument against the dusk. This resident has openly mocked our authority, she snapped. He is destabilizing the community with signage and weaponized design choices. Someone in the crowd coughed, maybe a laugh. Margaret Chen, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s, raised her hand. But, isn't that his private land, I mean? Can we even regulate that? The temperature in the room dropped. Victoria turned slow and sharp. The HOA has jurisdiction over anything that impacts property values and well-being, Margaret. Perhaps you've forgotten the kayak incident. Margaret shrank back into her seat. Harold clenched his jaw beside me. I checked the time. 7:57 p.m. Tom's text buzzed on my phone. Bank is ready. Need confirmation in 3 minutes. I looked up past Victoria, past the projector to the faces in the room. They weren't angry. They were waiting. And I was about to give them a reason. Pause for a second. If someone tried to fine you $500 a day for something legal on land you own, what would you do? Would you cave? Would you argue? Would you pack up and leave like the 12 families before me, or would you do what I did? Quietly build a case. Trace every dollar they stole, and buy the very ground they thought made them untouchable. Because tonight, right now, I sit at the back of this HOA meeting laptop glowing $2.1 million one click from moving. They don't know it yet, but the balance of power is about to shift. Comment: I'd buy it too if you'd fight back with facts, not fists. Or comment run if you think I'm about to awaken something I can't control. Because in exactly 2 minutes, the Queen's about to lose her castle, and she's not the type to go quietly. Victoria was still talking, voice rising, finger jabbing at the screen like it owed her money. I propose an immediate vote to increase daily fines and initiate removal proceedings against the houseboat effective. I raised my hand. May I say something? The room turned. Victoria froze mid-sentence. Mr. Reed, how dare you? I'd just like to acknowledge something I said calmly, fingers still hovering over my trackpad. I didn't know about your husband. I didn't know how painful this must be for you. If I had, maybe I would have approached things differently. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Her walls trembled for half a breath. But, since we're discussing property values... 8:00 p.m. My phone buzzed. Tom's message transfer confirmed. You own Sterling Point Marina. Congrats. I clicked the final confirmation. And while Victoria tried to raise her kingdom, I'd just bought the land it stood on. I stood slowly, calm, precise, the way you do when you're about to change everything. Before this vote concludes, I said there's something the community deserves to know. Victoria snapped. You're out of order, sit down. As of 8:00 p.m. and 30 seconds. I continued raising my phone. There's been a significant change in property ownership. The projector screen still showed my houseboat bathed in golden light. I tapped my phone, casting a new image. Wire transfer confirmation. Amount $2,100,000. Timestamp 8:03 p.m. Recipient Riverside Bank. Asset Sterling Point Marina. Silence hit the room like a blackout. Then chairs scraped. Phones lifted. Gasps. Murmurs. Victoria's face went white, then red, then something between panic and rage. "You're lying," she whispered. "I have the deed. The marina's mine. I'm your new neighbor, Victoria, and just like that." The Queen had no castle, only an audience, and a reckoning. The room exploded. People leapt to their feet like someone had pulled a fire alarm. Phones were up, voices rising, a chaotic blend of shock and something else. Relief. "You can't do this," Victoria shouted, voice cracking. "That marina is my husband's legacy. It belongs to this community." Bob Henderson, gray-haired, gentle, the man whose sailboat had once been declared a hazard, stood tall. "Actually, Victoria, it belongs to whoever paid for it. You taught us that." Laughter broke through the tension like glass shattering. Margaret Chen raised her hand this time without trembling. "You used those same words when you forced the Johnsons to sell their boat." "That was different," Victoria snapped, but her voice was losing gravity. She was falling fast. And suddenly, she wasn't a ruler. She was just another homeowner in a room full of people she'd crushed for 5 years. And no one was standing with her anymore. Harold stepped forward slow but steady like he'd waited years for this moment. "Speaking of payment," he said, pulling out his phone, "I think everyone here should know where their HOA fees have really been going." He connected his device to the projector. The houseboat image vanished, replaced by bank statements. Line after line. $10,000, Lake Maintenance Sterling Point Marina, $15 or $500, community event, prep. Sterling Point, Marina, $18 to $200 aesthetic improvement. Sterling Point, Marina, the room gasped as the total grew tens of thousands. Possibly hundreds. "That's embezzlement," someone whispered. "Fraud," said another. I stepped beside Harold holding up the HOA charter, and a breach of fiduciary duty. That's when the doors opened. 2 detectives entered, calm, focused, no hesitation. "Victoria Harlow," one said, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds." She turned frozen. You set me up." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." As the detective pulled out the cuffs, Victoria twisted voice rising to a shriek. "You don't understand. He's trying to destroy me. He knows about Robert, about the marina, about everything." The room froze again. She was unraveling. "My husband died because of a houseboat. It wasn't an accident. The railings were too low. He'd been drinking. He was stressed about the money. He fell." She stopped, eyes wide. Every phone in the room was recording. Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you saying there's more to your husband's death than reported?" Victoria's face cycled through fear calculation. And finally, defiance. "I want a lawyer." But the damage was done. She had just admitted the unthinkable. There was more to Robert's death, maybe even intent, maybe even cover-up. As the detectives led her away, she turned one last time. "You don't know what you've bought, Mr. Reed. That marina holds secrets, and now they're yours." They led Victoria out in silence, heels scraping hair undone the Queen stripped of her crown. Behind her, the projector still showed bank statements. Evidence, justice, victory. But the room didn't cheer. It breathed. Like a storm had finally passed, but no one was sure what it left behind. Margaret Chen stood first. "I motion for an immediate vote of no confidence in Victoria Harlow as HOA president." Seconded Harold said louder than anyone expected. Hands rose 49 in unison. The only hand not raised was already in a police car. People wept, hugged, laughed through tears. Bob Henderson whispered, "We can bring our boat back now." Someone else shouted, "Freedom Bay. That's what it should be called." I smiled. For the first time, I felt it resolution. But then I looked toward the lake, where my houseboat rocked, gentle, silent, watching. And I remembered her words, that marina holds secrets. Not a threat, a warning. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened. Laughter echoed from the docks. The Washingtons were back tying up their old sailboat like it had never left. Kids biked past with streamers. Margaret carried her kayak down the slope, yellow and proud. It felt like healing, but not for me. I stood alone at the edge of the Marina Freedom Bay, as they now called it, coffee cooling in my hand, eyes locked on the far end of the lake, where the water never rippled, where the shadows seemed deeper than they should be. I'd inherited more than a marina. Victoria hadn't just ruled with fear she'd buried something under it, maybe grief, maybe guilt, maybe worse. And now, all of it was mine. I turned toward the old boathouse she'd kept locked for years, a place no one had dared enter, not even Robert. It creaked in the wind, like it remembered things no one had confessed. Pause for a moment. Let me ask you, if you just spent $2.1 million to win your freedom, only to realize you inherited someone else's secrets, their shame, their unfinished story, would you walk away, or would you open the door? Because that's where I stand now, the boathouse at the edge of the marina, boarded since the night Robert died. No one's entered it. No one wants to. The locks are rusted shut, but inside something's waiting. Records, a journal, a blueprint. Or maybe nothing. Or maybe everything. Comment, dark secret. If you think I should open it, or comment, leave it if you believe some truths are better left buried. Because tomorrow morning I'm bringing a crowbar, a flashlight, and a bottle of Nerve. Victoria ruled with fear. I won with facts. But the lake, it doesn't care who owns it. It only reflects what's already there until you look too close. The sun dipped low, painting Freedom Bay in soft amber. Boats swayed gently in their slips. The dock creaked under quiet footsteps, not in fear this time, but in renewal. I sat on the edge legs dangling over the water, my houseboat glowing in the last light. Not as a defiance anymore, but as a promise. It's strange. How peace isn't something you build. It's something you protect. And sometimes to protect it you have to fight. Not with noise, not with anger, but with patience, with truth, with the courage to outlast fear. I didn't come here to win, I came to rest. But what I found was a battle no one else had dared finish. And maybe, just maybe, this story isn't over. Maybe the lake still remembers. And maybe some ghosts don't want justice. They just want someone brave enough to listen. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever stood your ground for something you love, feel free to tap that like button, subscribe for the next chapter, or share this with someone who might need the reminder that even when things feel quiet, the truth always finds its way to the surface. Thanks for being here. Let's see what happens next.